now for a panel discussion on the reform of the Common Agricultural Policy post-2020. And I'm joined by Thomas Cooney, Environmental Chair at the Irish Farmers Association, Martin Kenny, Agricultural Spokesperson for Sinn Féin, Michael Fitzmaurice, Independent TD, Roscommon Galway, and Pat McCormack, the President of the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association. If I could start off by asking you all for your views on the proposed legislation of the CAP reform. Thomas, I'll start with yourself.
I suppose, first of all, we want to get the budget secured, and we'd be disappointed with the 5% cut even in the budget. We want to protect the envelope that's coming to Ireland. We want to ensure that as much of it goes to the people who are actually farming as possible. We want the people who's trying to make a living from farming. We want to try and make sure that they are continued to be supported. There's a talk about an extra environmental ask on farmers. We're probably one of the most sustainable countries in the world to produce food. We have the lowest carbon footprint in the world in dairy farming, beef farming, one of the lowest as well. So we don't want our sustainable grass-based type farming to be restricted. We want it to be supported going forward and as much as possible.
And Martin, your views? Do you think it's a good proposal?
Well, I think, we're not sure yet where it's going to end, but first of all, I think the envelope has to be kept as close as possible to where it was, and in fact it should really be expanded on. Brexit has been used as an excuse to cut the payments back, but the amount of money which Britain was putting into the EU, the actual cut in the CAP is greater than that, so I think it is being used as an excuse for the cut of money away from CAP. Really, I think we need to be focusing as well on Pillar 1, because Pillar 1 is where most farmers get most of their money, and I think we need to look and see how Pillar 1 can be used to enhance the family farm and to ensure that the family farm is made sustainable in all parts of Ireland. Personally, I would be very much in favour of a front-loading of Pillar 1 payments so that the small family farm can get the most payments possible. Most farmers in Ireland are farming 30 to 40 hectares. They should be getting a decent-sized base payment so that they can make the farm sustainable into the future, and that's what I think is one of the key things that we need to try and deliver in this particular CAP reform. But we also need to be looking at Pillar 2 and getting environmental measures there which are workable for farmers, because a lot of farmers in loss are finding it very difficult. If we can go back to something similar to the old REP schemes, I think it would be in a much better place.
Michael, what are your thoughts on it?
As the two previous speakers have said, first of all, it's the budget is very important, and a lot of talk has come out about, as Martin pointed out, about the UK or Britain when they leave, that to be a big problem. And yes, it may be a problem in some ways, but in the line of the budget, I think it's something like 100 million, but the cut that they're talking about is more than that. I think that we cannot keep going back paying people for what they done 20 years ago, to be quite blunt about it. I think we have to protect the family farms. I think front-loading, I would agree 100% with Martin on the front-loading, because we're seeing it day in, day out. If a young fella, we're trying to get young people back into farming, and look right throughout Europe, there's a major problem. Well, if you've somebody's father getting 3,000 or 4,000 in a CAP payment, and in total payments they might be getting 8,000 or 9,000, those youngsters aren't going to be brought back into farming. And we have to I agree as well that we cannot just have people being paid to have land nearly empty. You have to be doing a certain amount of farming. You cannot be just basically topping it and getting away with drawing grants. Simple as that. I think we have to make a real effort that people are doing a certain amount of farming. I don't agree with this idea of having donkeys covering you for getting grants. That's being quite blunt about it. I think you have to be doing a certain amount of farming. And we have to go back, I agree with Martin 100%, to protect the family farm. And if we want the family farm, these are the decisions that has to be made. Do we want the family farm to continue, or do we want landlordism? Because if we don't protect the family farm and front load the first 15, 20 hectares, and then if there's more to divvy out, fine, no problem, we divvy it out. And we need to bring in also, that's on Pillar 1. On Pillar 2, we need to make sure we bring in a meaningful environmental scheme that for farmers that are prepared to go into it. And unfortunately at the moment, as well as that, we have to start eliminating some of the red tape. Farmers are frightened of their life when they see a car pulling up outside. We need to bring in a system, and Europe needs to do this for all their farmers, not just Ireland. in my opinion, a yellow card system that if an inspector calls, a farmer isn't ready, that you can flash the yellow card and say, we're coming back in a month or two, whatever, and that we give them a chance, because we cannot sustain farmers being looking out the window or looking out their shed, afraid of their life of someone pulling up outside, because they're on the breadline at the moment. They've gone through a difficult spring, they've a difficult summer put in, and they're heading into a fairly difficult winter, and you can't keep kicking at someone the whole time. We have to work with them. We have to remember that there's 12 billion in exports in this country that's reliant. When the country was gone down the Swanee, it was agriculture that kept it there. So it's now payback time for these farmers.
And Pat, what are your views?
Well, Claire, I'd have to agree with the three speakers there on the budget. The proposals seem to want farmers to do more, and the budget is being cut, and that's unacceptable. Certainly we need the budget to be maintained. Obviously, in Pillar 1, I suppose there is going to be a great debate. We failed in the last reform to define an active farmer. Now we're going to try and define a genuine farmer. So, we need people that are genuinely farming the land, genuinely at a meaningful level, as the previous speaker has said. Front loading, I think maybe there's a role there for front loading, certainly, possibly not 0 to 30 or that, but maybe 10 to 30 in hectares, where you leave out the first 10 hectares for front loading, but you would pay it on the next 20 or whatever the case may be. But certainly, over the last number of days, one issue that will be coming up, and it came up for the last 9 years, I'm here at the stand for the last 9 years, is what was mentioned here by the previous speaker, single farm payment inspections, and the terrification that's out there amongst farm families that some morning they'll arrive out and there'll be one car or maybe 2 car loads arrive in on them to do an inspection. They talk about monitoring being the new buzzword as we move forward with CAP reform, but if you were to analyse monitoring, it's almost a guarantee of an overview on a very, very regular basis. So we'd want to be careful about what can come out of national discretion, because constant monitoring is completely being inspected.
Yeah, because it's going to be very focused on cross-compliance, and it's going to be results-based.
Without a doubt, and the camera doesn't always tell the full picture, but that's Pillar 1. Obviously on Pillar 2, we'd like to see an environmental scheme that would be meaningful for vibrant farms. It was mentioned earlier there that the REPS payment, to go back to farm-based payment, that was of benefit to the wider rural community. Sheds were painted, walls were built, gates were hung, hedges were maintained, and it had a spin-off in the rural economies. And that's what, because the evidence is very, very much there that for every euro that's brought into the rural economy in that regard, there's a 1.7, I think, is spin around the local economy. The REP scheme was the first rural environmental scheme, and most farmers would say it was the most compatible to real farming. Obviously, with the nitrates and with climate change and that, we'd like to see the pH soils of the soils analysed and brought in maybe to an environmental scheme where they'd be brought to their optimum level for the optimum usage of fertilisers, because at the moment there's only 10% of soils at the optimum pH level, and that would be of benefit to the wider environment to a massive degree.
Commissioner for Agriculture and Rural Development, Phil Hogan, is very adamant that this proposed legislation will lead to greater simplification of the CAP, particularly because each member state will be given more control to design a CAP to suit the country, to suit the sector, to suit the most vulnerable areas. Do you think it will lead to greater simplification, Thomas?
Well, it will have to, because farmer, it's not working, the cotton system isn't working because there is too much bureaucracy and red tape tied up in it as it is. So we would be hoping, we as an organisation in IFA will be liaising with the department, we will be lobbying the department to make sure to ensure that there is further simplification of it. Also, what I meant to say earlier, the suckler cow will have to be protected. The suckler cow is under threat in Ireland at the moment, and especially in the western half of the country, in my own county of Cavan as well. The suckler cow numbers are declining, and if there's not a substantial payment there for the suckler cow going forward, she will disappear, and it will be a huge hit to our beef industry, because our valuable cuts of beef comes from the suckler cow, and it's the lifeblood of the west of Ireland, of the two lads counties here beside me, and she has to be maintained going forward. Also, I would agree, an environmental scheme, it will have to be a workable environmental scheme that will come. It would need to be up to 10,000 euros per farmer maximum, and the ANC payments will need to be increased as well. And as I said, there will have to be workable schemes where they won't have payments held up and an awful lot of hoops to jump through the current KT to get them, where it's impossible to. So I would agree with that, yeah.
But do you think that the Department of Agriculture will be able to simplify the process for farmers, that it's not, when Europe isn't in, well, they'll still be in charge to a certain extent, it'll still all have to go through Europe, but do you agree that it's a good move for greater autonomy to be given to the member states? What do you think, Martin?
I think it should be a good move, though sometimes I think, if they were announcing that they were going to make it more complicated, that we'd feel better about it, because it actually might get simpler. Because for as long as I can remember, every time there's been a review of CAP, they've talked about simplification, and everything comes out of it at the other end is the direct opposite to it. So, people are very sceptical of it, and most farmers are extremely sceptical that it will actually get simpler. But I think, this reform or review of CAP is an opportunity to change things, and if that opportunity is embraced by everyone and we come out with a solution at the end of it, it will be, a huge move forward. Really, I think at the end of the day, we have to look at what is the advantage that Ireland has from an agriculture and food production point of view. We have the family farm model. The family farm model is where most consumers in Europe want to see their food come from. We produce the finest food in the world, grass-fed, free-roaming animals, dairy, beef, lamb, excellent quality product, and yet the farmer doesn't get, if you like, the premium price that they should get for that product. That's one of the big gripes that I would have, and part of the while it's within CAP and all of that, and you have market rules and everything, it's difficult, but government, I think, has to step up to the mark and do more to protect the price that farmer gets, so that at the end of the day, the primary producer gets a good return for the work that they put in, because that's one of the big problems that we've got in the area, in the sectors that are under most stress, particularly sheep, sucklers, even the tillage sector. All of those are back to prices being the problems. The base, if you like, that we have to put under, the platform we put under it, is what CAP provides. CAP provides a platform that farmers can go out and farm the land and know that they can at least have a fallback position. And one of the things that make farming profitable and therefore make the rural environment and the rural community vibrant is ensuring that we get a decent price for the product that they produce. And to date, that has been the big failing, if you like, that we've had in the last number of years, that farmers have found that they can't get an adequate price. And we're looking into coming into a winter now, and in the next number of months, a lot of the farmers around me are mainly suckler farmers. They'll be selling weanlings. They're dependent on the beef men to come down from the Midlands and the South to buy their weanlings. A lot of them have a huge problem with fodder shortages, and they're saying they're not going to be buying in cattle this winter. So if they're not going to be buying in cattle this winter, we're looking at a huge problem for an awful lot of farmers who are in the suckling sector, and it's coming at a time when they're all already under huge pressure.
Michael, where does the priority need to lie?
Well, first of all, I think that for both politicians and for farmers, you're saying that we may have more autonomy here. The problem up to now is that you come here, you go to a committee in Dublin, and they say, well, this is European, and then you go over to Europe, you fly back to Brussels, and they tell you, oh, well, your own state has autonomy over this. And you wouldn't know is it a good thing or a bad thing what's been, what they're doing, for the simple reason, you go back to the last CAP, when Cleos wanted to try and help the family farm. He was shot down. That's it. That's the reality. We have to, if we're in Ireland interested in protecting the family farm, it's either now or never. This is our time that's coming, 2020. On top of that, as Thomas rightly pointed out, and Martin, the suckler cow, everyone knows the decline that's gone on. Everyone knows the numbers of them that has been sent to factories. There's denial going on about it. But the reality of it is that at the moment, we are losing quality weanlings. We don't have if you have a good quality weanling in the market this minute, they'll make a good price. Unfortunately, most of them that's going into the market this minute are plainish, and they're not making the price. And that's the reality. We have gone to this so-called 5-star under the beef genomics, and I hope that this suckler cow grant is needed. But if it's tied to that, we are going down a road of producing a lesser quality. We're producing them for Mr. Goodman and everyone else that's in the factory business. But one time ago, we had an Italian trade. We had trades where the good U-grade weanling was heading to. what I would call with a good square arse, to be quite blunt about it. And you had markets for them. But now we are losing that market, and you go into any market, what farmers are taking for plainish cattle at the moment is criminal. They're not going to survive. So let's get real about where we need to go. And we have to make sure that we bring in a meaningful, now, and also put a cap on it. I'm not talking about that you give it to 100 cows. I'm talking about that you give it to the average amount of cows.
15.
Yeah, fine. But that you bring in a little bit. It's like a person in business. If you bring in a bit from 3 or 4 different things, you'll make them viable. But if they're getting a bit there and nothing here and nothing here, you're not going to keep them in it. It is desperate stakes at the moment in parts of the west of Ireland with farmers, because the prices they are getting for the weanlands that they have, that they were driven to produce, and this is the reality of it, they were driven to produce over the last couple of years, isn't what one time ago. You are actually better in a lot of cases be without the beef genomic grant and have a good Arden Charlie weanland that will make a good price. And this is the facts of it. And it has to be said out, because unfortunately farmers may be codding themselves by going down this road that they're being driven. And with Europe, I hope that there is more, it's looked at more favourable here. But we have to make sure that we protect, if we want to. This is it. There's a choice coming. And let politicians forget about talking about it from 2020 on. Because it's either now or never. It's 2020 or forget about family farms in Ireland.
Pat, the beef sector strongly pointed out here as the area that needs priority support. On the dairy side, what proposals will you be putting forward from the ICMSA under the cap?
You know, I think in the cap, I think that the dairy farmers' payment is well below the national average. You know, I suppose there are issues there for the suckler farmers. I'm not sure that maybe a redistribution of their own money to themselves and asking them to jump through more loops is the answer. I think to want to be very, very clearly a palatable scheme for those farmers. But obviously on the dairy side, we'd like to see volatility managed in a greater degree, but we believe there's flexibility for our government within budget, the national budget, to do that through the farm management deposit scheme, as we've alluded to earlier in the Ploughing match, you know, to allow farmers in a year of reasonable prices to put money aside to bring out in more challenging years like 2018, or indeed years where there's milk price collapses. Obviously, you know, I suppose we'd like to see the intervention facilities kept in place or you know, reopened, albeit they're at a poor level of 1,700 euros per tonne for skim milk powder, but nonetheless they have provided a floor in 2009 and again in, I think it was 2013.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you all very much.